Welcome to the HVAC Know It All podcast. Recorded from a basement somewhere in Toronto, Canada. Your host and HVAC tech, Gary McCready, will take you on a deep dive into the industry, discussing all things HVAC. From storytelling to technical discussion. Enjoy the show.
All right, so Pat, Matt, I want to get right into this and do a little bit of discussion around commercial kitchens. And I got to say, from my experience in commercial kitchens, I have a little bit of experience, not a lot, a little bit. And from what I can say, a kitchen that I've worked in is either pristine or it's filthy. It's never in between. And I mean, there's restaurants, I will tell you, I will never, ever eat in the restaurant because I have seen what they do there. I was recently in a pizza place because I had to walk through the back to get to a roof door. And there was one of the guys had like a Rubbermaid tub that you would store things in, and it was half filled with chicken wings and sauce, and he was rummaging it around and stuff. I'm like, that doesn't seem right to do that in like a Rubbermaid bin. Shouldn't that be done in like a big stainless steel bowl or something like that that's a little more sanitary? Anyway, so Pat, I'm sure you got a ton of stories like that, and I want to get into this life of a commercial kitchen tech and some of the ins and outs of it. So maybe start off, kitchens, mostly, are they gross or are they mostly clean in your experience?
Like you said, it's either pristine or it's trash. I mean, there's some that are in between. Just depends on where you're at. I mean, I always tell people if you can see the kitchen, generally you're safe to eat there. So people always complain that McDonald's are dirty. I'm like, man, you can see the kitchen at McDonald's. You can't see the kitchen at your high-end steak place. I mean, like I use an example. I was asked to go to a high-end steak place. I'm talking like $150 a person. They were building a new location, and they asked me to come in to evaluate their equipment. And I'd never been in there. I opened the back door and looked around. I said, "Who's the manager?" And they pointed to this guy. And I went over there. I was like, "I'm here to evaluate the equipment." He's like, "Oh, what do you think we should take over to the other store?" And I was like, to be honest, throw it all away. I was like, because you don't want to drag these bugs, everything else into your brand new kitchen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my father-in-law bought a restaurant at one, or he didn't buy it. Sorry, he kind of, I don't really know the story, but he ended up getting this like bar restaurant, and we went into the back because he wanted me to look at some of the stuff, the gas stuff and the connections and the freezer and the cooler and all that. And the place was filthy, and he paid somebody to come out and clean the place. And the first guy that came, he quoted him over the phone. The first guy that came after the quote, he said, "Yep, sorry, I'm not doing this. Sorry, I'm walking away from it." And then he found another person to come in and clean it, like take the fryers right out from the wall and clean in behind. The person ended up doing it. I think it cost him like around a couple grand or something like that for the person to go through and clean the kitchen. But I mean, I think it's worth it to get the kitchen immaculate and pristine. I mean, he could have done it himself or him and his friends or wife or whatever, but I mean, I guess that gets to a point where nobody even wants to touch that stuff. Have you been involved in cleaning a kitchen, or are you just working on the equipment itself?
Well, I work on the equipment, but I also install a lot of equipment. And sometimes I'll go out to a store to do an install at night, and I've pulled out fryers and they wouldn't pull out. I'm talking to the manager, like, "Man, we haven't pulled this fryer out in years. The casters are broke." So I literally had to drag it out away from the wall. It had grease all the way up the back of it. And it adhered itself to the wall. So it was like electric fryer, and it plugged in. And I pulled out 3 of the 4 cords, and the 4th one I couldn't pull out. And it was encased in grease. I couldn't see it. So I just grabbed real hard and jerked. Well, apparently the receptacle went bad, and they hardwired it, and it was just hanging out. It wasn't attached to the wall or secured with anything. It had wire nuts, and I ripped the wire nuts out and thought I was going to burn the store down. But that's really the only time I clean. So if I get to a situation where I'm doing an install and I don't want to work in that environment, most of the time when I tell the customer, "Hey, we're $119 an hour," I'll clean it, but you're better off having someone else clean it. Most of the time they tell me to get out of the way and have someone else do it. But it's amazing what you see. I don't get it. I mean, you go in these restaurants and the floor tiles are a big thing here. Everyone uses floor tiles because they're cheap and easy. The problem is that grease gets underneath there and eats up that grout, eats up the mortar bed, and the tiles come up, and then they can't pull the equipment out. And then you run into instances where they just don't clean behind there because they can't pull it out anymore. It's sad that it gets to that point. And this is like big major chains. I mean, it's not like it's a mom and pop place. It's just they just lack of maintenance. They don't want to spend the money to fix the floor in order to pull the fryers out, or they don't want to close for a day to fix the floor because, they'll come in at night and they'll slap floor tiles down. They won't clean the floor properly. They'll throw new floor tiles down and grout it and come in the next day and start cooking on it. Well, that stuff's not set up. It's not cured, and it's busted back out of there a couple weeks later.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm going to let Matt ask a couple questions because I'm sure he has some. But I do want to say that you mentioned McDonald's, you can see the kitchen, and any restaurant that I go to that I can actually see the kitchen, it makes me feel better because I worked at McDonald's as like an 18-year-old kid. I hated every minute of it, and I only lasted there a month. But it was fairly clean in the McDonald's kitchen. I will have to admit that because they had manuals and stuff that you had to follow to clean this and clean that at certain times of the day. And just like a hamburger, it can only sit in the hopper thing for like 6 minutes or something. I can't remember the actual number. Then you got to chuck it in the garbage. So the kitchens were really, really clean. Matt, do you have any questions as far as the line of work that Pat's in and just how we can sort of expose this part of the industry?
I mean, I've only worked in a handful of kitchens, nothing specifically. I mostly deal with comfort cooling myself, but there have been a couple times where I've gone into like a kitchen at like say a golf course, country club, that sort of thing, and that's interesting what you're saying there too, because I think a lot of times it's more on that gross side that I've seen. It's not very, very clean, but I would echo what you're saying though, Gary. Like I worked at McDonald's years ago when I was in college, and even at a Burger King that was along the Pennsylvania Turnpike, which is a toll road along the state here, and those places seem to be a lot cleaner than when those places that you can't see. Then that's where it seems that the dirt and grime really seem to kind of like show, because those people they don't see it, so it's kind of an out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. And that's what it seemed to me. That's been my experience anyway. But with you, Pat, I guess what exactly? I mean, I've seen other guys work in like the food service industry, but are there like specific challenges that come with that? Because it seems like you would work on like almost anything and everything. Like you could deal with almost like burners and then refrigerators and all sorts of other things. So what's that like when you have to like deal with just all different kinds of appliances?
So I'm not gonna lie, I have ADHD, and it suits me well because it's always something different. When I first started, I just started doing hot side stuff. So I was doing like ovens, combis, that kind of stuff. And I got bored with it. I was pretty good at it after about 3 years, and I wanted to do more. And so I got into refrigeration. But it leads well for me because I'm in and out of all different kinds of environments, working on different things. I mean, some days I may work on 4 or 5 different types of equipment. Some days I'm installing something. So it's always something different, and it's always cool. But we do gas, we do electric. I mean, we do steam powered stuff. We do everything in the kitchen, dishwashers, disposals. I mean, if it's in a kitchen, we'll work on it.
I know this is going to be a popular talking point, is ice machines, because I mean, ice machines are one of those things. Like I have, to be honest with you, I have very limited experience working on an ice machine, and it wasn't until about 4 years ago that I laid my eyes on my very first ice machine, very first one. And I'm like, this is cool, man. I want to see how this thing works. And because I didn't know, I've heard people talking about ice machines and harvest and refrigeration cycle and all that kind of stuff and dumping into the bin. But I didn't know how it worked. I didn't understand it until I actually physically seen it. So when it comes to ice machines, I guess my question would be, are they really like that difficult to work on? Or is it just something that you just kind of gotta wrap your brain around, get the method of this, it does that, and then once you kind of have that cycle down pat, you understand them a little better? Because from my understanding, a lot of people have difficulty with ice machines. How difficult are they really to work on?
They can be difficult, but most of the time it's generally water related issues. 95% of my ice machine calls is rarely anything to do with refrigeration. But 1% is probably electrical. I'll lose a fan motor, a pump, or a cylinder or something. But 95% of the time, it's water, crappy water. So people don't treat the water, or there's other environments in the air. So a lot of bakeries have a lot of yeast in the air. That stuff gets in the ice machine, clogs it up, kind of creates like a little snot. It's kind of, some will turn pink, some will be black. Just depends on where you're at or what you're working with. And then lime scale is the devil in my world. Our industry could be cut in half if we had perfect water everywhere. Lime scale, it sticks to those plates, and then unfortunately you have guys that don't pay attention to what they're working on, and they'll clean a machine with the wrong cleaner and actually eat the coating off of plates. And it's all different kinds of things come into effect. But they're not difficult. You just got to take your time. And if you don't understand the sequence of operations, there's manuals for everything. So back to, read the manual. Find the manual, look at the sequence of operations, and you got to have patience. A lot of guys, they'll think they fix an ice machine, it drops one batch and they're out the door. Well, I tell my guys, first batch doesn't count, and then you're counting the next 3 batches. You're timing it out, you're checking your pressures, you're making sure everything's in line. So it's just a patience game.
So can I ask you to take 2 minutes and just go through the cycle of an ice machine, if you don't mind, for the guys out there that don't know how it works?
So the majority of your machines start off with, most of the new ones have like a pre-chill where they chill that plate. And when they're chilling that plate, a lot of times they'll be filling the reservoir. So you got a water reservoir that's below the plate. And that's,
when you say plate, it's the when you say plate, that's where the water sits to make the cube.
So that's where the water runs across to make the cube. So it's the evaporator plate.
Yeah, okay.
So it's just a heat exchanger. It's a cold plate heat exchanger. So some of them have ridges, some of them have cubelets. It just depends on what type of machine it is. So it chills that plate, it fills the reservoir, and then it kicks into a freeze cycle. And that freeze cycle, it actually pumps the water from that reservoir across the distribution tube, and the distribution tube runs that water evenly across the evaporator plate, and the water travels down the evaporator plate, and it freezes. And it continues that cycle until it freezes till whatever causes the harvest. Some models, it has an ice thickness probe that actually senses conductivity of the water to ground, and that triggers the harvest once it gets that thick. Some uses a microphone where it senses like the volume of the water running across there, and that'll trigger a harvest. Some actually use low pressure controls. When that low pressure gets to a certain point, it actually initiates the harvest because it thinks, okay, my plate should be this cold, I've used this much water, and it'll kick it into harvest. And some use a water level. So it measures the water. So the water will go down, it fills back up, and that water will go back down again. And once it comes off that float for the second time, it knows, okay, I've used this much water, it's time to harvest. So it just depends on the manufacturer, how they harvest or how they sense the water volume, used, or the ice thickness. So there's a lot of different variables. I mean, just like in the HVAC world, there's a million different manufacturers do everything differently. The same thing with the ice machines.
Yeah, for sure.
So once it's satisfied, though, that the ice is where it needs to be, it goes into harvest. And most people use a hot gas or a cool gas bypass valve. And what that does is it routes the gas. Instead of going to your condenser, it routes it back through a loop, right back in after the TXV into your ice plate or your evaporator plate, and puts that hot gas in there. And that's how it assists and aids in defrosting. So that hot gas actually heats that plate up, and then the ice falls off. Now, some have an air puffer, so it's a little air motor, and it has tubes, and it pushes air up against the ice to help assist get it off the plate. Some just rely on gravity, and then some have like a little rod that actually is on a little actuator and actually pushes the ice off the plate to help aid in harvest. And then the cycle starts all over again. So, but these cycles vary. Some of your smaller machines can do like a 10 minute cycle, but you have your big Hoshizakis, those cycles can be 45 to 50 minutes depending on variables.
Wow. Matt, we got a professional here. He just nailed the operation of an ice machine in about 3 minutes, and like the back of his hand.
Oh yeah, for sure. And as what you're saying about the ice machine and the harvest, to me, reminds me of a heat pump in heating mode. I mean, to make an equivalent to people that are out there that do the comfort cooling kind of thing, where it's like, you have your heat pump and it runs and runs and runs. It builds that frost up, and then it switches into that defrost mode to get rid of the ice. In this case, though, you have this intentional buildup, and then you use the hot gas then to kind of melt a little bit of that ice like on the back of it, and then it helps either, then you're saying it slides off or it gets pushed off in a variety of ways.
Yeah. For sure. And the way I'm used to hot gas, because it's basically a hot gas defrost, and I'm usually used to hot gas defrost in a refrigeration setting where you're trying to get rid of the ice on the coil so you can have proper airflow across the coil. But in this case, it's not for that at all. It's to melt, basically, for lack of a better term, melt the ice off of the plate so it drops down into the bin, right?
Yep. It hits the sheet and rolls down to the bin. It's a pretty simple process. What happens to a lot of people is they get kind of confused on it. If you're low on gas, you're going to notice issues in harvest. So that can be an issue. A lot of guys get hung up on that. Hey, it freezes great. Well, if it shows a little bit low on gas, just like everything else gets low on gas, you're not metering correctly. You don't have enough heat to melt that ice off. You'll have long harvest cycles and stuff like that. So just taking the time to understand the sequence of operations. But like I said, 95% of the time it's water related. Just they're gunked up, man. They get full lime scale, you have an uneven water pattern across that evaporator, and then you start having freeze issues.
Mm-hmm. So what about cleaning an ice machine? I mean, you don't have to spend too much time on it, but the process of cleaning an ice machine, it's not that difficult, right? I mean, the last ice machine I cleaned, I used some ice machine cleaner and ran it through like the nickel free stuff or nickel safe stuff, not nickel free, nickel safe stuff. And basically ran that through, and the manufacturer said get some like baking soda and water, and that was good enough to wipe down the bin and all the other components, and take components out that are removable and put them in a bin of baking soda and water and kind of let them soak. I don't know that, like, this is the first time I ever cleaned an ice machine. That's what the manufacturer told me, is to use the cleaner and baking soda and water to wipe down and soak everything. But I mean, I'd like to hear how you do it and how you clean the ice machine.
So the baking soda is two things. It's there to help neutralize that citric acid that's in that nickel safe cleaner. So when I do it, just depends. If they have really good water and it's not really slimed up, I'm not doing a deep cleaning. You can get by with just running the chemical through the reservoir. Most of them have instructions on the cover. You can read the instructions. I want you to mix so much chemical per so many ounces of water, based on which size unit it is. Some do automatic cycles where it tells you to add, the cleaner. Some tells you got to manually dump it, just depending on the model. But I like to run the chemical through it, and then once I get the chemical through it and flush, I will then run a sanitizer through it. It's just a chlorine-based sanitizing product, and that sanitizes all the surfaces and helps kill some of the growth as well. If it's really bad, I'm gonna go ahead and start off by putting in my descaler or my cleaner. And then I'm going to let that run through the system. And then once that's done through the system, I will actually take and strip the unit apart. I will pull off the distribution tubes. I'll pull off the pumps. I'll pull off the ice thickness probes, the water probes. I will take this thing completely apart. I will take it to a sink. I will scrub it. If I need to put more chemical on it to get the lime scale and the buildup off, I'll do that. While I'm doing that, a lot of times I'll take hot water and I'll melt all the ice out of the bin. If it's that point, I have to tear it apart. It's going to be bad. So I'm going to go ahead and melt all the ice out of the bin. And then once I get everything wiped down, all the slime, the gunk, the lime scale off of everything, I'll put it all back together. I'll run sanitizer through my machine, so I'll let it circulate through the machine like I was the cleaner. And then I'll put some sanitizer in a spray bottle mixed with water, and I'll actually sanitize the entire bin. So you're getting anything you may have introduced in there and anything that's in the air or stuff like that. You got to think ice is food. So you technically need to handle with gloves. You need to make sure it's food safe and it's ready to go when it starts making ice. So that's why I spray all my surfaces down I've touched in the whole bin and make sure it's all wiped out good. And then I'll take a hose with hot water and I'll rinse all that sanitizer off there. And then what I like to do is once it starts making ice again, that first batch, I don't count it. I don't do anything with it. I just let it fall because, you've had the machine apart, you've had it hot, that first batch may take too long to freeze. You may have some issues. So once that first batch is gone, that's when I start my clock. I time my freeze cycles, my harvest cycles. I'm checking pressures at initiate a freeze, 5 minutes in the freeze, when harvest kicks in, and then during harvest. I write all that stuff down, and I try to make sure everything's averaging out the same. If everything's averaging out the same, I know I'm good. So by the time I get that fourth batch in there, I go ahead and take that hot water again, and I melt all that ice out, and I let it go. It's back to being their baby.
Nice. So, Matt, you got any questions about the ice machine thing before we go on to something else?
So how long does that process take you then, roughly? Because it seems kind of like a little lengthy process. Sounds like it might take you a few hours to do that. Just like one ice machine, if you're being that thorough about it.
Yep. If it's that bad of a cleaning, it's I tell them at least 4 hours. And if it's a big machine that has like a 45-minute cycle, like a big Oshizaki, it's going to be close to 6 hours. But I mean, they can understand that machine has to be cleaned properly, or you're just introducing bacteria and lime scale into people's drinks. I mean, I'm sure we've all been in restaurants and you're drinking water and your ice melts. You can see like little floaties in there. That's just lime scale and everything else. I mean, I know people that start this job and they never have ice again. They refuse. Everywhere they go, they're like, I just want no ice. I'm like, well, when's the last time we cleaned the nozzle on the pop machine?
Yeah, true. So do you this is an interesting one. Do you take care of the mechanical stuff outside of the kitchen, like exhaust fans and makeup airs? Do you take care of that stuff or just the stuff in the kitchen?
No, we do exhaust air. We do exhaust. We do makeup air units. We do HVAC as well for restaurants. So I'll do some rooftop stuff. Luckily, most of my stuff's all RTUs, so I don't have any split systems. We did have an account to have some split stuff, and I didn't take care of it. But no, it's anything in a restaurant. I mean, I don't do plumbing. Some of our branches will actually hang like bathroom divider stalls. Well, the hand dryers in the bathrooms, the World dryers, we actually service those. So, I mean, anything in the kitchen, we're down for it. But I just don't do like plumbing like in a bathroom. But if it's in a kitchen, I'll run water lines, drain lines, dish machines. I'll do drain lines, water lines. It don't bother me. I'll do it all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I wanted to kind of educate the audience, and after we're done with this kind of part of it, Matt's got some questions, and you guys talked earlier behind the scenes about some personal stuff that I think is valid to talk about, and that's where Matt's going to come in here and talk to you about that. But I just want to ask you before we go on, because I think there's a lot of people that don't really understand how the air exchange in a kitchen should work, because we need to have exhaust fans because we're cooking, we have gas appliances, we need to get rid of that air. But when you get rid of that air, I don't know if anybody's walked into a building and they try to open the door and the door is kind of stuck, and they finally open it and they feel the air whooshing in from inside. It's because it's under a negative pressure. And a lot of times it's because the kitchen, they're using their exhaust fans, but they're not running their makeup air, or it's broken, or they need to install one, or whatever, right? So can you maybe talk about how, even though we're exhausting air, we got to bring some air back in to help neutralize sort of the air in the building, the pressure in the building? Yeah.
So a lot of my customers, they have makeup air, and they have like a gas-fired unit. It's not very efficient, it wastes a lot of gas, and it still doesn't do a very good job, especially when it gets really cold. So they just won't turn the makeup air on. And like you said, you go there and you go to open that door, and it doesn't open. It finally opens. You get a big whoosh of air coming in. So I try to just make sure that the filters the filters for the intake of the makeup air are clean. Make sure they're in there. Make sure the gas is firing off. Make sure the customer's aware that, hey, you need to do this. You get someone's hand smashed in the door. Little kids get trapped in doors and stuff. So you just got to make sure you have that air coming in. A lot of times in my stores, we don't really do air balancing, but the air balancing guys will, open up the dampers on the rooftop units and stuff. So it brings in some air too, because they know how the restaurants are. It's cold in there, especially in the morning when the heat's not on for the building, and you first get in and you're firing up all that stuff on. They don't want to turn that makeup air on, because this is going to dump cold air on them. So, we try to make sure that at least some of the dampers are open on the rooftop units, so at least it can draw some fresh air through there. Yeah, and I mean, some of these places, they're interlocked. Like you go in, you turn a couple dials, push a couple buttons, and both of them come on at the same time. And I guess if you do that and the makeup air doesn't come on, I mean, I guess the exhaust fan's only going to run at that point, unless they're interlocked to only work together, and they don't come on at all. And then they got to make a phone call because now they can't use their exhaust fan. I've seen different scenarios, and I'm sure codes are different all over the place, because I know, for instance, if you're going to fire a makeup air that's indirect fired, direct fired, right? You have to run an exhaust fan, and it has to be interlocked. So the exhaust fan has to run first in order for that makeup air to even start, right? So there's lots of different scenarios that could play out there, but I think it's important that everybody knows that, I mean, we want that exhaust fan, to exhaust the kitchen fumes and smells and all that, but we want to make the air back up in order to prevent the building from going in a negative. And it's not really good for gas-fired appliances either to have such a strong negative when you're firing up a burner, right? Yeah, it's rough. So I get stores, a lot of times they'll leave their hoods on at night when they leave. And I've had, like some places that have like rethermalizers. So rethermalizer, it's like a fryer, but you cook pasta in it, or you cook soup in it, you heat up bags of soup or product. Well, those have water, and there's water lines behind those lines, and they'll leave their hoods on overnight, but the makeup air shuts off, and it actually will draw in enough cold air from outside and freeze the water lines behind the equipment a lot of times. Because most of the stuff here actually they have the grease intake across the top up high, you see, but then down low, the hood actually sticks out from the wall like 4 inches, and actually draws air from down there too, and it'll freeze water lines. So, but I mean, the hoods have come a long way. We do some work for a company called Accurex, and they have phenomenal hoods. It's all variable speed. It has heat pumps on the makeup air side. It's conditioned. I mean, this thing's it was 100 degrees outside, and it was putting in 75-degree air into the kitchen. I was like, this is amazing. Awesome. So the kitchen life, the commercial kitchen life, has served you well as far as livelihood, as far as like good, solid, honest work, right? Oh yeah, it's a tremendous field. I mean, it's getting better. I can't complain. I never thought when I was in high school that I'd be doing what I was doing. I actually started off life as an electrician. I went to vocational school for 2 years as an electrician. I wired houses through school. I did ballast at the high school. So we'd be there changing 277-volt ballast in classrooms with kids in there live, blowing stuff up, doing stuff we shouldn't do, stuff they can't do anymore, especially. But I came out of high school. I was an electrician for 7 years. And I never thought about doing what I was doing. And my dad did it. He started off as HVAC, and he kind of morphed into kitchen stuff. And the company he worked for got bought out, and he didn't want to be a part of a big conglomerate. So he got me his job pretty much in that branch, and then it's kind of grown. But, I was a union electrician, and I make more than journeyman union electricians do. And then, currently we can work all the overtime we want. You can work as much as you want, and how much you make is up to you. If you're willing to learn and willing to try new things and willing to do more, you're going to make more, just like any other job. It's about the effort you put forth, but it's a good career. There's guys doing pretty well that have no idea what they're doing. So it's weird, but
oh yeah, there's lots of those. There's lots of those.
Yeah, that's just the trades right now. It's crazy. We're hurting. Yeah. So,
all right. Well, Matt, I want you to jump in because, like I said, you guys were talking earlier, and I think Pat has got some really good, life, personal stuff that he dealt with, but it's related to this trade because from what I know, it's made him a better tradesperson, a better person all around. So I think it's worth talking about. And you just started a podcast around sort of surrounding these topics, right? Where you're talking about just things like depression and giving exposure to it, and things like about what Pat's going to talk about and stuff. So if you want to just let the audience know about your podcast quickly, and then jump on with Pat and ask him some questions, and you guys can discuss what you came to discuss with him.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I just recently started a podcast called Trade Therapy. And like you said, Gary, it's basically to highlight stories of tradespeople that have dealt with, whether it's mental health issues or, addictions, depression, that sort of thing. And so I've had a couple episodes with some people. And so that's why I'm kind of getting some stories from other people. And there are other people that have decided to jump on, they've heard about it. And Pat was willing to kind of share a little bit of his story as well with me. He shared quite a bit earlier. So, but that's the idea. And the gist of it is to share these stories and say, we're not just these macho men tradespeople anymore, tradesmen, tradeswomen, we don't have this machismo attitude where it's we're just going to suck it up and deal with it, where it's just no, we have problems, we have stresses, we have things that we need to deal with. And so it's a matter of kind of highlighting and saying, look, this is normal. We need to deal with this. And if someone listens to any of these stories that I'm starting to put out, and then they're kind of a light bulb goes off on their head and they go, oh, you know what? I have something in my own life I should deal with, then all the better. That's kind of the inspiration for that. And so I know, Pat, you had said, you had started out in this industry, and no one can see the video, of course, but those of you who have followed you on Instagram, of course, know that you're not exactly a small person. So, that was something that you had kind of hinted at. So go ahead. I guess you just start with where, like you said, you were a union electrician, and I guess we'll just go from there as far as how things started to, transpire.
So, like I said, I was an electrician. I got this job. So I was active, up and down ladders, carrying rolls of wire, pipe, that kind of stuff. I was busy all the time, go. And I got this job, and I went from being busy 8 to 10 hours a day to I'm sitting in a van now for a half to a quarter of my day, and I'm driving between jobs. So you go to a restaurant and, you fix something and, hey, you want some food? You want some lunch? And, at first I wouldn't do it. So the first 6 months I was no, this is nasty, whatever. And then I realized one day, I was man, I ate at all these places beforehand, whatever, it is what it is. So over the years, I just, you go into a place and they can't open up because this piece of equipment doesn't work, and you get in there and you're the hero, you fix it. So I've ate anywhere from McDonald's to 5-star steakhouse. There's a fancy place downtown Indy that all the athletes eat at. I've eaten there. Everywhere I go, you fix it, you're the hero, and they feed you. Well, the problem is I'm not active anymore. I went from being up and down a ladder all the time to sitting in a van anywhere from 3 to 5 hours a day. And then when I do get somewhere to work, at that point, I wasn't doing refrigeration. So I wasn't up a ladder on the roof. I was just, I get in front of a unit and I sit there on the ground if it's something on ground level, or if it's, I stand there. I'm sedentary at this point. I'm not moving all the time, and the weight started to add up. And shortly, probably about 3 years into it, I started having gained enough weight where I had sleep apnea. I transitioned jobs because I wanted to do refrigeration, and the place I was at wasn't willing to train me. So I transitioned to a job, and I worked there for about 9 months, and then that place ended up going under. So I went to a couple other places, and my sleep apnea was so bad that I was actually falling asleep driving. I was in my first place. I was in like 3 wrecks within 2 or 3 months. The guy came and called me in one day and said, "Hey, Pat, I love you. You can fix anything, but I can't insure you anymore." He's like, "I'll let you go." So they took me home. I was off work for about a month. Still doing bad habits, eating and drinking like I shouldn't be doing. And I got another job, and then I did the same thing. I wrecked several vans. I had my van fixed. I wrecked it. I fell asleep on a job thawing out. I was doing a reach in. I was laying on down. And I had to reach inside to thaw out this coil. And I literally fell asleep. And the manager took a picture of me sleeping and sent it to my boss. And once again, between the wrecks and that, I was a liability, so they couldn't hire me. They had to let me go, so they had to fire me. So I'd been to the doctor, and I did a sleep study at that point. I lost my job, so I didn't have insurance. I needed a sleep machine. I was smoking cigarettes. My aunt stepped up and actually bought me a sleep machine, and it changed my life. I started sleeping again. My wife had actually slept on the couch for like 3 to 4 years because I was snoring so bad, or I'd quit breathing in my sleep and be gasping for air. She just couldn't take it. So she actually slept on the couch for years. I mean, thank God she's a saint. I mean, I couldn't have done it. I mean, she didn't leave me, but I mean, it all changed. I got that CPAP machine. I started sleeping. I quit smoking. Then I got a job where I'm at now, and I've been here 11 and a half years, and it's been great ever since. But, even when I got here, I didn't change my habits. I was eating more and smoking more and drinking energy drinks to stay awake. So that was my way of trying to keep myself awake, is I would literally eat or I'd drink or I'd chain smoke, because if I had a cigarette in my hand and I was moving around, it was keeping me focused on something. So it'd keep me active. The moment I wouldn't have anything in my hand, I'd fall asleep. It was the craziest thing. I'd go to my kids' sporting events and I'd fall asleep standing up at the fence. I don't know how many times I fell asleep standing up, and I just fall down. So, I mean, it was crazy. So that led me, to going from 235 pounds, 16 years ago, to I've had this spiral. I've been as high as 440. Last year at AHR, I got down to like 340. I slowly climbed back up to 400. I'm back down a little bit right now. So it's just, it's a wild ride, man. I don't wish it on anybody. Like I said, I don't know how I got here. I mean, I know how I got here, but I don't know. I can't believe I let myself get to that point.
Yeah, and it's a common theme I hear amongst some of the other people I've interviewed. So far, it's been all men, but all of them say that their wives are saints, and I agree with you there. Like, my wife was the one that definitely was the one for me. For anyone who wants to listen to my story, like, she was the one that basically was like pushing me and was like, "Look, you need to basically get your crap together, or else." And so that was like, a wake up call for me to basically be like, hey, I'm not being a good husband, I'm not being a good father, with what was going on in my own life. And so I imagine that was probably the same thing with you, with your wife, perhaps, where it's just like, hey, you're doing our family a disservice in this sense.
Yeah, she never came out and said it, but you could tell she wasn't happy. I mean, she wanted me to get better, but she didn't know how to say it. I mean, she'd say stuff to me, and I'd get an attitude about it. I'd go off about it. And I feel terrible about the way I treated her over the time, because she was never trying to do it out of ill intent. She wanted me to be better. She wanted me to be there for our kids and for her.
Yeah, for sure. And so what would you say then was kind of like I guess, like the low point where you did realize like that there was something that needed to be fixed, that something had to change, or else something was going to really go off the rails?
So with the weight gain and everything else I was going through, I'd get depressed. I mean, I would never be thinking about suicide or anything like that, but I just get into periods where I dwell on something. So like I said earlier, I have ADHD, and like my thing is I will let the smallest, most minute thing spiral out of control. I will hyper focus on that one thing, and it just ruins my whole day. I mean, it could be something stupid as I tripped over something walking in, or my shoe came untied, or I left a tool in the truck and I got to go back out there. And it was terrible. But, with the depression, I would eat, that habit that was just there. It was instilled from when I was trying to stay awake, and then I rolled it into a coping mechanism. I'd be sad, and I'd go to the gas station, I'd buy a bag of chips and candy bar and, Mountain Dew or Monster energy drinks. And then, that was my, okay, I feel better. And then, later in the afternoon, I'd get down again. I'd go do the same thing again, the same cycle. And it was just a vicious cycle. But, people, you guys are on the internet. I mean, Instagram, luckily, is not like most other places. Most people are fairly nice and fairly happy, but I got wrapped up in being a troll on the internet. So, if I'm going to be miserable, I was going to put other people, I was going to make them miserable. So I was going to go, someone that asks a stupid question, I just, jump on the bandwagon and make fun of them instead of being supportive like I should. And then that role.
Hey, have you ever trolled me, Pat? Sorry,
no.
Busted.
I found you after.
I've dealt with a lot of trolls, and I'm like, I wonder if Pat's ever trolled me.
No. I actually when I found you after I made the change to be a better person. So no. And back to the trolling thing, I would lash out on the internet. So I'd make posts, complaining about my friends, my family, my employer, when really there was nothing wrong. I just didn't know how to handle situations I was in. So I'd get on Facebook and just start bashing them. And one day a friend reached out to me. He's a mentor. He's actually a manufacturer. He works for a manufacturer. And he called me. He's like, hey, pardon my language. He's like, what the are you doing? I was like, what do you mean? He's like, that's not you. Why are you posting that crap? I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he told me, and I was like, oh, that's no big deal. He's like, no, that is a big deal. He's like, that's terrible. He's like, you're not that type of person. He said, you're generally pretty, go lucky or whatever, And I literally talked to this guy for 45 minutes in a Chuck E. Cheese parking lot. I had to go work on an exhaust hood. I'm crying my eyes out because this guy's giving me hell about how I'm acting. And he's like, you need to talk to somebody. I was like, well, I think I just did. And I never really talked to anyone else about it, but it changed how I handle things. So I quit trolling people. I quit being so negative. I started being more positive, and things started changing. It was amazing. I was just being more supportive, and my career started getting better. I get more opportunities, and this was 4 or 5 years ago, and it's just the things that happened in the last 4 or 5 years just because I don't put out that negative energy. It's just amazing.
It's funny.
I just want to say, sorry, Matt. I want to say one. Actually, you know what? You finish that thought, and I want to jump in about the sleep apnea thing because it's really important for a lot of men. And I'll tell you about something in my personal life that I'm about to do as well. So, Matt, you finish that, and I'll go on.
Sure. No, I just wanted to comment and say it's funny you're saying about the candy bars and the monster drinks because, I mean, you've probably seen there's all sorts of construction play pages or construction memes out there, and that's all they talk about is just the joke is hey, what's your lunch? Oh, I've got this breakfast burrito and 2 monster drinks. I'm good to go for the next 4 hours, kind of thing. And it's just funny, but I think in some way, though, yeah, we make fun of that because that's the stereotype. But at the same time, though, like you're saying, though, that shouldn't be a norm. That we should be saying, well, no, we should all be having a decent meal. And I know I've heard that plenty of other places as well, where some of these other people out there. I know one of the guys I had on Viking Pipe Fitter, Colton, who works for Viga. He's been on a little bit of a kick on his page talking about some health things and just saying, hey, look, I'm trying to be a better person. So I do see some people out there that are influential in a way to say, look, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. We should be taking care of our bodies and taking care of ourselves. We shouldn't be subsisting on energy drinks and gas station food. I mean, that's just not the way to go. And it sounds like you kind of made that realization yourself with your friend there.
Yeah, I give up on, I don't eat the junk like I used to. I mean, I still occasionally, I'll drink an energy drink, but I drink the sugar-free ones, the zero ones. And if I drink them, I don't get the full, I can't handle the regular monsters. I mean, I'll drink a white monster if I'm down. I mean, I work a lot of hours and I run on little sleep, we're in the service industry. You guys understand. But I try not to rely on that stuff anymore. But I mean, like I said, I've had this 100-pound swing. That's what I call it. I've done it 4 or 5 times over the last 6-7 years where I get up 100 pounds, down 100 pounds. It's just a wild swing, a wild roller coaster. And I'm sick of it. I've tried fad diets and lost 100 pounds last year. And then as soon as you get off it, you gain it right back because you're starving yourself or you're eating some weird stuff. And it's just not sustainable. So now I'm trying to focus on, homemade foods, salads, lean beef, lean chicken, salmon, that kind of stuff. And I'm trying to work out twice a day. Viking has actually been a pretty good friend of mine. I tag him just about every day I work out. He's a pretty good dude. So he's been some motivation to me. And there's a couple other guys that are pretty good too.
Yeah, I'm glad, like Matt, I'm glad you started a podcast geared towards mental health because I think it's really important. And I mean, Pat, you have just been so forthcoming about your own personal life. And I think that's great because in a way, that's therapy. Right now, that it's therapy because we might not be psychologists or psychiatrists or whatever these people are labeled these days. But speaking to people that are kind of in the same category in life as you, and just getting it out is therapy. You don't need to pay somebody to do it. You just need to grab some people that you can speak to and on the same level. And I think that's all you need, right? You just reach out to somebody and just start spilling the beans and talking and get some good, positive, honest feedback. And what I wanted to say about the sleep apnea thing is I think a lot of men struggle with the snoring thing and the wife kind of elbowing them in the ribs. I do. I do. And I said to my wife in November, December, I said, listen, in the new year, I'm going to go for a sleep study, because the snoring, it affects my life as well as hers, because it keeps me up. I don't get as good sleeps as I should. I wake up tired because of it. And it's funny. I find like if I'm watching TV or something, I fall asleep on the couch. And I don't end up on my back if I'm kind of like on my side and my back's against the back of the couch and I can't roll on my back. I get a way better sleep because I'm not on my back snoring. And I told that to the doctor. He's like, that's interesting. And I know of a friend of ours who, when I first met him, was a complete dick, right? He was a dick. And then all of a sudden, like it was like one summer, like we seen him again and he had like his mood was different. He changed. And I'm like, he's different. Like, I wonder what's going on with him. And then he revealed he had a CPAP machine and he was getting awesome sleeps. And he's like, I got a CPAP machine and it changed my life. And I'm like, what is it? Like a big machine and a mask? He's like, no, it's not. He's like, it's just this little box and this little thing that sits on your nose. It just keeps pumping positive pressure air into your nose. I said, that's it. He's like, yeah. So I'm going to go for a sleep study myself, because I want to figure out if I have any type of sleep apnea and figure this out for myself and my wife as well. So that's just my 2 cents on that matter.
Yeah, it's actually a lot easier than it used to be. I mean, some places still make you go to the hospital and they hook up to all the machines and stuff. And my son just did one because he's 20 years old and he's getting his tonsils taken out. He's got tonsil stones and it like makes his breath stink, and he's real conscious about it. So he's like freaking out. So he's got his tonsils taken out, and they actually made him do a sleep study first, just part of the process. And he actually had an at-home kit. So it's a microphone you wear, and it has sensors you put on your chest that measures your heart rate and that kind of stuff. And then the microphone goes under your nose and just senses your breathing. And so, I mean, there's all different kinds now, but mine I did originally 11, 12 years ago was, take a home one, and it did a pretty good job. But the dick thing, I was the same way. I was a terrible person because I was tired and I was cranky all the time. Just imagine if you're up for 20 hours working or whatever, you're cranky. You say things or act ways you shouldn't act. I mean, take it out on people you shouldn't. And I remember that first night I slept with that machine. I woke up the next day and I was like, man, I haven't felt like this since I was like 13 years old. This is amazing.
Yeah, that's good. Well, it's like, and you're saying too, like my wife, I mean, I same thing with me. I don't necessarily think it's sleep apnea, but I just know if I lay on my back, if I happen to fall asleep on my back, next thing I know, I'm getting an elbow because I'm starting to snore. But if I'm on my side, I'm fine, which is how I generally prefer to sleep anyway. But yeah, I get the whole, the wife elbowing thing because it does happen to me plenty of times.
Awesome. So, I mean, we kind of went through the kitchen stuff, which is very cool. There's probably a ton of more stuff that I'd like to talk to you about within a kitchen, Pat, but I mean, we only have so much time in the world, and we're almost at 45 minutes here or so. But I think that we can get you back on and talk about some more kitchen stuff at another time. But I did really, when Matt approached and said you had some stuff to talk about personally, and you were willing to talk about it, I'm like, I think we got to spend at least half the show talking about it, because I think it's an important aspect of life in the trade that we should tackle. So I really thank you for that.
Yeah, I feel that, I'm going to tell my story. And if someone has similar, situation or experiences, maybe they'll feel like they can talk about it, or they can reach out to somebody and ask for help or get a sleep study or something. I mean, don't suffer. I mean, I'm lucky I didn't kill myself or kill anybody else driving the way I did. I'm lucky I'm still here at the weight I was at. I'm doing better. Hopefully I can hit some goals. I'm trying. I'm working out once, twice a day. Nothing crazy, but just moving. Watching what I eat. But, there's no reason to suffer in depression or anxiety. I mean, even if just talking to someone helps. I mean, if you guys talk to a doctor, if you need to go to a doctor and get on something, I mean, that's whatever helps you. But, just listening to people like me talk about it, if that inspires somebody, if I can help one person, I'll tell my story 1,000 times.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, man. Throw Matt, last thoughts?
I just wanted to say, no, it's okay. I just wanted to say thanks, Pat, for sharing your story. And actually, I wanted to thank you, Gary, for one, letting me co-host, but also for kind of being an inspiration to do this, because I know you had talked with a couple guests about some mental health stuff, and that was kind of what springboarded the whole thing, where that kind of pushed me to say, you know what, I should actually start doing this, because this seems to be a topic that not only yourself, but there are plenty of other people out there talking about it, but no one had actually made something specifically for. So thank you for the inspiration, and thank you, Pat, again for sharing the story and for being willing to do that.
Yep, you're welcome.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having me.